You know, like sometimes you see the old time, like radio shows, they would have a live audience and then they would broadcast around the world. So like all of you in the audience, like to be authentic, there should be like a sign here and it flashes, laugh, right? And then it says applaud. And for us it would say, chant now, loudly, chant more loudly, like that, right? So nobody out there sees the sign, only the people here. Okay. Why don't you bring a Gita? Maybe, okay. So, Puchanlo Jairanamada. Do I need to pull any of the knobs or every harmonium? Yeah, definitely. Maybe usually it's the big ones. Is that?
It's a very old harmonium.
Is it?
My father-in-law's harmonium.
No kidding. That's wonderful. So your parents are Vaishnavas?
Yeah, we are basically from Sri Vaishnava family.
Oh, wonderful. Balaji Maharaj ki jai. So how many times have you walked up Tirumala Hill? Do you know?
Tirumala Hill, basically not to Balaji. We worship Lakshmi Nrsingadev.
Lakshmi Nrsingadev. There's a Lakshmi Nrsinga temple in Tirupati. Yeah. Oh, you go to Ahogalam.
I have never been.
That's on the mountain.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've been. That's a beautiful place.
That's where they have the Ahobilamat.
It's very flat and then
Yeah.
just like that. And we were there maybe 20 years ago, and they had many of their pundits were there, and they were just transcribing, or what the right term is. They still had all the old palm leaf text, I don't know from how many centuries ago, and they were digitizing them on the computer when we were there. They had like a big room full of all these palm leaves and air conditioning, very high tech. You're like out in the middle of a plain with a mountain and a temple, and then you think, oh, this very ancient temple, but here's the air-conditioned, high-tech transcribing to capture all these ancient manuscripts. So it was very interesting. Yeah. But next time and ISKCON has a beautiful temple in Tirupati.
Yes,
You went to Tirupati, so you went up, but you didn't walk up.
we have been so many times, right?
Okay, but not walking.
Yes, I had.
So how many times?
One
One
time.
time. Okay, I've been the same. Okay.
He has done so many.
How many times?
I don't know, like maybe 2-3 times. I don't
Okay,
know how
good.
many times exactly.
I went up the backside. There's 2 stairs.
Yeah.
There's the front side, which at one point goes like this, and there's the back side, which just goes,
Oh.
yeah, it's all steps. They say it's a little shorter, but it's more steep. Yeah, but it's beautiful. And then when you get to the top, they're waiting for all the pilgrims with some nice prasadam milk. Yeah. How much time? You just had Rompa Swami here for what, 2 weeks?
Yeah, he just left this morning.
Amazing. So you're the ones that are still left standing. Everyone else is home resting after so much, too much nectar, right? You're also, I do notice all of you are leaning against the wall, though, so that's... Anyway, thank you for coming tonight. I needed to come to Chicago, and I thought, I can't come to Chicago without coming to Naperville, so I realize you all been very busy in service, so appreciate your taking time to come. We can do a little hearing and chanting together. It's nice. Maom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine. Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravari Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschachari Shatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hey Radhe, hey Govinda, hey Gopal. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hey Govinda, Gorninitai. Jayo Radha Shama Sundar, Radha Shama Sundar, Radha Shama Sundar Radhe. Radha Shama Jayo Jagannath, Jayo Jagannath, Jayo Baladev, Jayo Subhadra. Jayo Gonanitai, Jayo Gonanitai, Gonanitai, Jayo Gonanitai. Jayo Prabhupada, 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 Jayo Prabhupada. Nitya Gora Hariva, 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 Gora Hariva. Nitya Gora Hariva, 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 Gora Hariva. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privrajikacharya Asto Tarasata Shishimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privrajikacharya Asto Tarasata Shishimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavadindi Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premji Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shaima Kunda Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yogi Ki Jai, Prihat Bandhangi Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai, ISKCON Naperville Dham Ki Jai, Vaishnav Sangha Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, Shri Shri Guru and Garanga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This page is falling out. It's a little reminder what not to do. Nice kirtan, nice house, nice evening, nice sunset, but just be careful. Huh? Yes. Okay. So it's nice to be here with devotees from Naperville Dham, maybe some other places too, we don't know. That might just be hooked up to upstairs, I don't know. I didn't check out the wiring, but maybe someplace outside Naperville. But it's nice to be here. I needed to come to downtown Chicago for the temple there, Sri Sri Kishore's temple for a few days. So I knew that it would be a great sin if I didn't come and have the association of devotees here. So I'm pleased, and I know His Holiness Rompa Swami was just here for a couple of weeks or something, right? So you've probably been having lots and lots of special programs and all that. So if anybody dozes off during my talk, I'll understand. No offense. Naveen Krishna Prabhu gave me a ride from Chicago. He told me a joke I hadn't heard before. Maybe it's a Illinois joke. Everybody knows it, but it relates to that comment I just made. He said, devotees all require 9 hours of sleep. Have you heard that before? I hadn't heard this before. He said, devotees all require 9 hours of sleep. I said, really, 9? He said, yeah, 6 hours at night, 2 hours during your japa, and 1 hour during Bhagavatam class. So I thought, okay. So hopefully that won't be the case tonight. We'll see. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. I felt so vindicated after I heard that. I thought, well, I only get maybe 7.5 if you count it that way. You know? I'm doing pretty good. So, okay. So I was asked to speak on a nice topic, if I have it right. Something about how building community, keeping Prabhupada in the center, like that. So that's a really, really beautiful topic. So I had some thoughts to share. And I took some notes as I was driving down, some thoughts. But also I wanted to kind of make it interactive. So, and regarding people dozing off, I learned many years ago that the best trick is when you see somebody dozing off, you call on them. So that's a warning, okay? You stay wide awake, I won't call on you, okay? Otherwise, it's you yawning there in the corner. You're next. You know, what are your thoughts on that? Okay. Okay. So I'm thinking maybe read a little bit, because it's always good to, when we have any kind of katha, we always should start with something shastric. So this is from the 10th chapter, one of the 4 most important verses often pointed to in the Gita, opulence of the absolute. So I'll read one line and you can maybe repeat. How's that? Majtita madkata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantascha mam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. Very good. Translation, English. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So again, thoughts, okay, pure devotees, their thoughts dwell in Krishna, lives are surrendered to his service, and derive great satisfaction, always enlightening one another, and conversing about Krishna. So this is a qualification of the great devotees. Majtita, their minds fully engaged in me. Mat gata prana, their lives devoted to me. Bodhayanta, preaching. Parasparam, among themselves, right? Sangha. Katayanta, talking. Cha, also. Mam, about me. Nityam, perpetually. Tushanti, become pleased. Cha, also. Ramanti, right? We know that word, ramanti. Enjoy transcendental bliss. So I'll just read part of the purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Pure devotees whose characteristics are mentioned here engage themselves fully in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. Read a little bit more. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout different planets of the universe, and out of them there are few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies, just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahma Jyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In that spiritual sky, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. It is explained that when this plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. In such a state, the devotee actually attains the transcendental qualities in contact with the Supreme Lord. Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. So, having Prabhupada in the center, building community with Prabhupada in the center. So I thought maybe we could kind of just look at this a little bit, because we are a community. You're a community. You allow me to visit, so I'm a part-time community member of Naperville, and happy to be so. So maybe as a community we can talk about some of these ideas on building a community with Prabhupada in the center. So I want to just start, maybe just ask the question, and don't be shy, and I'll try not to call on people. So, well, I might call on you, but we'll see. So, what are some of the reasons you might have? What are some of the reasons? And there's no right or wrong answer. Let's just explore this, because Krishna consciousness means we're reawakening something that's already there, but we've forgotten it. We're separated from it. So the process as described here, the pure devotees, they derive great satisfaction and bliss enlightening one another and conversing about each other. So while we may not be, in the strict sense, pure devotees, we're following the pure devotional path. So in that way, Prabhupada, if Prabhupada was sitting here with us, he would say, you're all pure devotees. Then we might think, Prabhupada, I'm not a pure devotee. There's so much darkness in my heart. But he would say, no, you're pure devotees because you're engaged in the path of pure devotion. And if you stick to that path, then pure devotional service will awaken. And of course, we know at the root, every living entity is a pure devotee Krishna. We've just forgotten. Some philosophies, they have the idea you can be kind of like, separated from God and that's it, eternally. But that's not our philosophy. We may be temporarily separated from Him. And that temporary time may be very, 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 very long, but it's still temporary. And our relationship with Him can be regained. By the way, I see some of you wearing masks. That's nice. I'm twice vaccinated. And I've been a free spirit soul since April 19th. I'd be happy to show you my card. If you want to see my card, I can verify it's in my suitcase. I have it there. Okay? No, because it's important we stay healthy. So what are some ideas you might have? Why should Srila Prabhupada be in the center of our community? We're talking about building community with Prabhupada in the center. So the first question we ask is why? Right? It's just like if you're we all were children at one point in time and your parents say, do this. We know especially American children, right? They're very expert. They spontaneously say, why? I think maybe in India they don't do that as much, Sometimes it's hard transition, right? The parents are thinking, we didn't ask that question. Why are you asking this question? Right? So that's the only time the parent gets to ask why. Why are you asking me why? The rest of the whys, they come from the children, right? Why? Yeah, why? Yeah. Why are you asking me why I'm asking this, Yes. So why? Okay? We'll be Americans tonight. We'll do the American way. Okay? So who has some thoughts? Why? And again, no right or wrong answers. See, we can brainstorm a little bit. What are some of the reasons why? Oh, you're going to be live on camera.
I was thinking without a leader, the followers would be lost at some point.
Okay.
So when we keep the leader in the center, then the followers always have something to look up to or someone to look up to during dark times or when they're confused about anything.
Okay, that's great. So we need a leader. I'm going to jot some of these ideas down. Okay, good. We all need a leader, especially in the dark times, right? Okay, good.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. With keeping Prabhupada in the center, we can follow what are the likes of Prabhupada, and we can cultivate a like-minded society.
Okay, oh, good. So it's kind of two things. We can, by following Srila Prabhupada, we cultivate the things that he likes, and we become like-minded society. Nice. Okay, great.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Haribol.
So, by keeping Srila Prabhupada at the center, he's a pure devotee, and the association of the pure devotee purifies. And he's an acharya, so following him in his footsteps will also help us go in the right direction as
Very
a
good.
community.
Very good, very good.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, in the disciple course, you only taught us Vapu, Vani. So
Okay.
Vani is very important.
Okay.
So we have to follow him, and all the books are written by Srila Prabhupada. So as you said, as you taught us, Vani is important, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Very nice. Is there any dessert tonight? If there's dessert tonight, she gets 2. Okay, she gets 2 pieces.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol.
I feel we all feel united having Srila Prabhupada in center,
Nice.
under one umbrella.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? That's a pretty good list, but if there's more, it's even better.
Srila Prabhupada has already built a big family, one family. So there's no doubt that we should get out of this family. So we should all be united under this one shelter, under Srila Prabhupada.
Very nice. Thank you. So what I jotted down, I might not have got all of it, but that if we keep Prabhupada in the center, then we're clear what Prabhupada likes, and then we can make sure that we are liking things collectively as a whole society. And you mentioned, because we all need a leader. Everybody needs a leader. We're all following someone, so keeping Prabhupada in that position for us. The pure devotee particularly has the purifying quality, so the benefit of following the pure devotee is an acharya, and we can follow, by keeping Prabhupada in the center, we know what the footsteps we should follow. And then comment, we should also look at his Vapu and his Vani, both, in terms of associating with him. And that we have his books are there, that he's given us so many gifts, the books, etc. We can remain united, remain in one umbrella. And also that, like we're talking about, how do we build community with Prabhupada in the center? He's already built the family, he's built the community, and we can just let it grow like that. We can be part of that. Great, those are all wonderful answers. I had to jot down some things. Let's see if I had anything. Again, why should he be in the center? A few, similar to what you have, but I'll mention a couple maybe a little different. That Prabhupada is this unique character for us because he brought the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition around the world. So he has that unique position. Nobody else is ever going to be the one who brought that tradition around the world. And of course, expertly understood how to modify and what to keep exactly the same and what to modify. You know, that's really a position of an acharya. I was at the American Academy of Religion a few years ago with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Garuda Prabhu and Ravinda Srila Prabhu, who are all senior Prabhupada disciples and also religion scholars. And they were talking about Prabhupada's statement that he didn't change anything. And then they were analyzing it, and they were kind of laughing a little bit because they said he changed so many things. Externally, you could say, 64 rounds, 16 rounds. Don't cross the ocean, but he crossed the ocean. Brahmachari ashrams, no change. Brahmacharini ashrams, that's a little change there, right? So, and they were kind of laughing, and I was, junior to all of them, and I was thinking like, okay, what exactly are you laughing about, and how do I understand this? And I don't want to commit an offense. And Prabhupada said he didn't change anything. And they were discussing that, what he meant by that. None of the core essential principles, the essential most important practices, policies, teachings, traditions, those were not changed at all. And yet, at the same time, Prabhupada adjusted things for the time, place, and circumstance. He talked about that all the time, right? Kalapatra Desha. You have to think in terms of what's the appropriate time and place and circumstance. And that so Prabhupada could very expertly transport the Krishna consciousness tradition, the bhakti tradition, all over the world. I mean, you think about how different the world is in so many places. Prabhupada's from Calcutta, but he spread Krishna consciousness in South India, and Prabhupada spread Krishna consciousness in Mumbai. I'm reading now Giriraj Maharaj's book about I'll Build You a Temple. Put in a plug. It's a beautiful book if you don't have it. It's very inspiring. So Prabhupada knew how, Prabhupada's simultaneously building Mayapur in the middle of the rice paddies of Bengal, and he's creating this beautiful temple in Mumbai, and then he's in America, right, at the Avalon Ballroom, surrounded by a bunch of crazy hippies in San Francisco in 1968, like the peak of the whole crazy hippie movement, and somehow he's getting those totally insane people to take up Krishna consciousness. And then he's going back and he's talking to professors and helping them appreciate the authenticity of the tradition and his own scholarship. And then he flies to Russia. At the temple, in Chicago, maybe you've seen the upstairs, the meeting room next to where Rompa Swami stays. They have some of these old Festival of India big panels. And there's one of Prabhupada in Moscow, with, behind the famous, it's the Kremlin now, I think it's famous, something somebody cathedral, Basil Cathedral maybe? It's like the famous emblem of Russia, right? In modern era at least. So there's this picture of Shamasundar took a little camera. According to his book, he had one of those little tiny pocket cameras with 12 pictures. Imagine, these days, right? You take 12 in one spot. You got to get the light just right. He was with Prabhupada in Russia. What a historic thing. He had 12 shots to take. And one of those he took, he's looking up, he's got Prabhupada walking in front. And I was just thinking, looking at that, what boldness. What boldness. I mean, he's of course, he's an elderly person, so that's a big deal. But he's going to communist Russia, the center of atheistic world governments, at a time of great tension. And he's not just going there as a Swami who happens to be taking a tour, and I hope they don't bother me on the tour bus. He's going there specifically to preach God consciousness in a place that's based on a philosophy that God doesn't exist, and that religion is Marx famously said, the opiate of the people. That was one of his big So you're going there by yourself with one disciple who's been a devotee for maybe a year and a half or 3 years at the most, into the heart of Russia to try to spread Krishna consciousness. So, who could do that? So bringing the tradition all around the world. And again, why should Prabhupada be in the center? When we think about all the leaders that we have in Krishna consciousness, sannyasis and gurus and, elder Prabhupada disciples and temple presidents and GBC members and so many people, all of them were trained by Prabhupada. So when we think, this person sings so nicely, why? Because Prabhupada taught him, inspired him. This person's so philosophical. Why? Well, because he learned that from Prabhupada. He or she learned that from Prabhupada. This person's so renounced. Where do they get that mood? It's from Prabhupada. This person is so expert at defeating Mayavadi philosophy. Where they? From Prabhupada. So it's like, the root. He's so much the root. And of course, as he said many, many times, I deserve no credit whatsoever. If I get any credit at all, what did he say? If I have any credit, what is my credit? Who remembers? Yes, I strictly followed the goal, the instructions, my spirit. I was a servant of my spiritual master. That's my only qualification. I tried to serve for his mission. So, in one sense, Prabhupada would say, I didn't do anything, but we know he did everything, by the blessings of his spiritual master and Krishna. So, keeping that in mind, that he trained all of our leaders. And maybe it's in the disciple course you mentioned, I think there's one exercise we ask devotees to think about. What are some of the ways that Prabhupada is present in ISKCON today? You think about, okay, well, let's figure, okay, now here we're building a new temple, but you figure, so, okay, we walk in the temple, okay, what are some of the ways he's present? Well, his murti is there, right, on the Vyasasana. A lot of temples, his murti is there on the altar, right? Every temple, his picture's there on the altar. So he's present in that way. And then, okay, well, who's standing on the altar? Well, it's Radha Krishna, or sometimes Jagannath, sometimes Gaurnitai, sometimes Lord Ramachandra, sometimes Krishna Balaram, but, sometimes Nrsimhadev. But why are those forms of the Lord there? Because that's who Prabhupada said to put there. And how about the standards of worship? Where is that? Well, of course, it comes from the acharyas, but Prabhupada gave us specific instructions how to apply those. So then you stick around for a little while and you watch people come in and everybody bows down and chants a prayer. What's the prayer they chant? Prabhupada's pranam. Now, there may be other pranams, but everybody's chanting Prabhupada's pranam. So, okay, he seems to have a presence here. And then they say, okay, now let's sing. Great, what are you going to sing? Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamani, right? And then at the end, Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivraja Gacharyastu Tarasata Shishimada's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And then you sit down and everybody sings a song. What's the song we sing? Whose favorite song? Was it my favorite song? Your favorite song? Maybe it is. But who said it was their favorite song first? It's Prabhupada's favorite song, right? And then you say, okay, now what are we going to do? Well, let's read something. Whose books are we going to read? Whose translations, right? And then you say, okay, great, we just read the verse. Now what are we going to do? What are we going to read next? The purport, his commentary, right? And then we're going to discuss. And then we're going to talk about his commentary. And usually a good class gives reference to his commentary from another book, right? Where they talk about not only that, there's a story of what he did or what he said here or there. So in so many ways, and even the name on the building outside, right? ISKCON. And of course, I'm not minimizing at all the immeasurable contributions of our previous acharyas, and Prabhupada would certainly say it's all by their mercy. But who gave the name ISKCON? It was Prabhupada. We know, Prabhupada, some friends said, why don't you call it International Society for God Consciousness? And Prabhupada said, no, that's not specific enough. We've come to teach people about Krishna. So even the name is there, even the ISKCON Society. So in so many ways, and of course, other things. He's the wisest. All of us, we looked at what, if there's some difficult situation, we think, well, what did Prabhupada do? Is there some similar situation? What did Prabhupada do? He set the example for all of us. And clearly, why keep him in the center? Well, there may be so many other points that bring us together, but Prabhupada is the one that keeps the whole society together, all over the world. Everybody has Prabhupada's murti. Everybody has Prabhupada's books. They may be reading them in Gujarati. We may be reading them in English. They may be reading them in, I don't know, maybe Swahili these days. Definitely German and French and Italian and Portuguese and Russian and 80 or so other languages, but they're all reading Prabhupada's books. So we can see how his role is very important and for all of our lives. So then another question is, how do we keep him in the center? Or, no, let's be before there. How will keeping him in the center? In other words, being conscious of this. Because you can walk in the temple and not really be conscious. Okay, we read a book. Whose book? I don't know. They mumbled some prayers. Whose prayers? We don't know. There's somebody sitting on the seat. Who's he? I don't know, but he's really been meditating a long time because I've been watching him and he hasn't even blinked in the last... Sometimes people say that he hasn't blinked. 30 minutes he hasn't blinked. Is he always in such deep meditation? You say, yes, he's always in such deep meditation. Yeah. So like that. So how will it help us to keep him in the center? A little different than what I asked before, a little bit. How will it really help us to keep him in the center, as opposed to if he's not in the center? How will it help us to keep him in the center? A little more nuance from what we said before. How will it help us?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
I was reading Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita some time back.
Very nice.
And in that, Srila Prabhupada very clearly mentions, after the passing away of his spiritual master, the Gaudiya Math essentially disintegrated. And So Srila Prabhupada was very, very careful about that and said, after me, this movement should not disintegrate. And that's the reason, he formed the GBC, and the GBC decided to make, like keep Prabhupada at the center so we don't go and fragment ourselves into whatever version of his teachings we want to go after. So
Very
keeping him
good.
at the center keeps the teachings true, his instructions are kept true, and we all benefit from it.
Very good, very good. So a corollary question. Is there a tendency to fragment in the modern times? What city are we in right here? What is this? Are we in Naperville?
This is Bolingbrook.
Bolingbrook? Rolling.
Bowling.
Bowling. Like bowling league, but they spelled it wrong, huh? Okay. Which is next to Naperville, which is next to another city, which is next to another city, which is next to another city, and everybody goes, I thought you lived in Chicago. Right? So you go back 100 years. I don't think there was a Bowling Brook 100 years ago, was there? Probably not. Something new. Yeah. Yeah, now in India, right? It used to, what is it? Which state just split? It's just where Tirumala is, right? Yeah. Yeah, they just
Andhra
split.
Pradesh split into two.
Andhra Pradesh split into two. Yeah, so the tendency is splitting. Yeah, so that tendency is there. So it's a good point to help avoid that. And we have the example of the Gaudiya Math. And of course, there's many individual maths that are still functioning, and all respect to those Vaishnavas and those Acharyas. Yet, as Prabhupada said, and we can see if they'd been able to stay together, how much more effective they would have been. Yeah, so very important. Good. Some other thoughts about how keeping him in the center will help us? Yes.
He can inspire us to do like more service.
Very good. Very good. Good. We all need inspiration, don't we? Very good. Okay, good. What are some other ways that keeping him in the center will help us?
Because we are praying to the Guru Parampara and it's the descending mercy. So Srila Prabhupada is always going to be the cornerstone from which we can get this descending mercy.
Oh, that's nice. I like that cornerstone. Yeah, that's very good. What is it when they put, maybe some architecturally, when they, maybe it's called keystone. When they build like an arch, and then they put the stone at the top, everything depends upon that stone, and then it's so strong, right? Like the Romans built these buildings, and probably some buildings maybe using that in India. They last for thousands of years because of that keystone. So cornerstone, keystone. That's very nice. Thank you. That's a nice example. What are some other ways that keeping him in the center will help us?
So we always have a good example of like what a good devotee is.
Good. Yeah, because, I was also thinking about that, looking at these photos all the time. And it's probably mentioned in this purport we read that the pure devotee keeps Krishna in the center 24 hours a day. We're not at that point. But, reading these recently, rereading a lot of these biographies, and devotees are always amazed. I just read Giriraj Swami was talking about, they're right in the middle of this big fight because this man who sold them the property was trying to cheat them at Juhu, and he'd already sold it to somebody else and then got it back and kept the money, and he was very, very difficult struggle. And Giriraj Maharaj was speaking about how devotees were so amazed because Prabhupada was dealing with so many headaches and legal battles and this cheater and trying to counter that. And then he'd just sit down and give like a perfect Bhavatam class. Devotees are like, 1 minute ago, Prabhupada was like, how are we going to deal with this problem, that, and talk to this lawyer, talk to that one, go talk to this man, okay, and then he'd sit down, Hare Krishna, and, So your point that, to have that example, and of course we benefit from the example of our friends and fellow devotees. We also set examples for each other and senior devotees, yet Prabhupada, he's the preeminent example. So that's a really good point. He's a preeminent example.
Prabhu, I'm thinking of something similar to what you just spoke. We all have our individuality and we want to serve in a particular way. If we don't have that common point, common platform, we we all would be thinking I'm serving, but can easily go in haphazard directions.
I think that's like the perfect answer to the next question, because I remember I was thinking a very similar thing. It's a really good point. That, and we all have our individuality, and not only we have it, but we're encouraged to explore it. Right? Prabhupada said that the purpose of my movement is to create independently, thoughtful. He said men, because in that era it was colloquial use, men, but means men and women. Except your spouse, of course. Not too much independence there is good. But so, said the purpose of our movement is to create independently thoughtful men and women. So it's interesting because the Shastra just talks about absolute surrender to the spiritual authorities, the Guru, the Parampara, the Krishna, and then there's this instruction: become independently thoughtful. So it's paradoxical, really, and something to think about. But just in this context, it's a very good point that we have our tendency to be independent and to want to spin off into something. But if we keep Prabhupada in the center there, then we can develop our individual inspiration and creativity, but because that center point is always there. And of course, Prabhupada gave that wonderful example that if you throw a stone in a pond, and he would say that, that center is Krishna, but as far as ISKCON, it's Krishna and Prabhupada as he presented Krishna for us. So if we keep that point in the center, there may be so many, each of us throws our rock, some big rock, some small rock, some we throw it hard, some we throw it soft. But the circles come out, they're all in harmony. It's such a beautiful example if the center's there. But as soon as the center moves, then there's so many difficulties that come. And oftentimes, too, when we have a lot of difficulties or different opinions and maybe some little bit of conflict or something like that, it's okay. I just raised it a little bit. When we have some conflict, one of the primary means to resolve that is to go back and say, wait a minute, who's in the center here? And even if our circles still are different, we can understand, okay, is Prabhupada in the center for you and is Prabhupada the center for me? Well then, okay, even though they may be different and our harmonies may not sing together so nicely, if the same center is there, then everything's okay. So a lot of times I know, even like in a practical way, let's say in your temple board meeting, and there's different opinions, should Rath Yatra be 1 day or 2 days? Should it be down this street or that street? Should we pay for the extra insurance for this or not? Should we get a bigger, all these different questions come up, and sometimes people have very different independent ideas. And sometimes it can get a little heated, it does. I'm sure that's never happened in Naperville, I'm sure, but in case you ever move anywhere else, I want to give you insights how to deal with those people outside of Naperville, where everyone gets along perfectly. I read once that says that this is the age of Kali Yuga, except Naperville. It's the age of love and trust, right? I've heard that. So, it's natural that there's going to be some differences, and sometimes little conflicts come up, and sometimes they're pretty strongly felt. That's when we have to sit back and take a deep breath and say, okay, let's make sure is Prabhupada in the center here. And, sometimes fine-tune. And, of course, generally we'll all think, well, yes, he is for me, but I don't know if he is for you. That's also the mentality. So, to stop and really think, well, what are the examples we have of Prabhupada? How would Prabhupada have dealt with the situation? What are Prabhupada's instructions? And sometimes, I know, a different generation example with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that sometimes when his disciples would out of quarrel, he would have them come together and say, okay, before we discuss this, to work it out, you say something nice about this Vaishnava. Now you say something nice about this Vaishnava. Okay, now we've cleared our minds a little bit. Now we can discuss. So it's a similar thing to say, okay, let's pause and remember. Like, say, with Naperville Temple, maybe we have some big disagreement on, whatever, how high the curb should be or whether the inside the building should be this color. However, those, just as an example. But we stop and think, well, wait a minute, let's even we may disagree, let's keep Prabhupada in the center. And we know, you probably heard that classic story Prabhupada told of the father who's being massaged by the 4 sons. Remember that story? Each one of them has a different arm and a leg, right? So one son's massaging the right arm, the other one's the left arm, another son on this leg and that leg, and everything's going nicely. And then they start thinking, my part is better than your part, you know. I don't know exactly how it developed, but, one said, I have the arm, you have the leg. Leg is lower. Arm represents Kshatriyas, is much higher class, or whatever. The right arm is more important. Left arm is inauspicious, So anyway, they start quarreling, but my limb is more important than your limb. And then Prabhupada tells the story, they started, punching the limb. That leg's not so important, my leg's more important. Finally the father says, stop, you're killing me. And your so-called devotion to a piece, a limb of the Father, you're not seeing the whole picture. So oftentimes that's very important, especially this is, we know it's the age of quarrel, and little quarrels can come up within families, among friends, among societies. Naperville against Bowling Brook, right? Who's going to pay to put the extra ditch on the side? They'll argue for 3 months about an extra $45,000 payments and something like that, or $500,000, whatever it is. So that's kind of the nature. So as you mentioned, that how will it help us keeping him in the center? I had that top of my list, that we all have our different ideas and that we want to be creative, but that by keeping him in the center, it gives us like the allowable leash. We all need some boundaries. So it gives us the maximum beneficial boundaries, but not to the point that we really hurt ourselves. And then I was thinking also, we all need measurements. How do we measure what's our progress? And he gave those measurements. And then, of course, as our founder Acharya, he presented so much practical information for us. So let's see, a couple more thoughts I had. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Think about, in terms of the emphasis on keeping Prabhupada in the center, we talked about unity, example, measurement, peer association. He's the Acharya and the founder in so many ways. What are some practical things we can do if we've all participated in this little exercise? Yes, there is value. Yes, we need to do this. So what are some of the practical things we can do to keep Prabhupada in the center? And it's actually not just an interesting exercise. For members of ISKCON, I think it's an essential sociological, historical, and organizational challenge. Because, I'm now, I know I only look 30, but I'm actually 66 years old. And the men aren't laughing because it hurts for the men, but the ladies are laughing. That's so ridiculous, but the men are like, hey, well, I'm slouching a little bit too, or whatever they're thinking. But, the point is, time goes by really fast. It actually goes by very fast. And for those of you that are a little younger, you think in terms of, let's say you're 10 years old, every year is 10% of your life. When you're 50, it's, what's the math? It's 2% of your life, right? It's 2, I get it right? 2%. So 2% is nothing. So it goes by so quickly, isn't it? So time goes by faster and faster and faster. So looking into the future, it won't be too long from now, there won't be any Prabhupada disciples here. Just like during my generation, Prabhupada would always say, he would paraphrase Abraham Lincoln, was it 70 or something like that? I'm 70 years old, 75, I don't know how much time I have left. Prabhupada would say that regularly. And of course, as his disciples, these young men and women were thinking, well, you walk faster than we do, you sleep less than we do, you preach with unlimited power, you fly around the world. That one of the amazing physiological things, Prabhupada would fly from New York to London. The minute he landed, he was on London time. Most of us, it's 5-6 days. Isn't it? Say kind of like 1 day per hour time zone. It's some of us are better at that than others. But it was really even physically superhuman how Prabhupada would do that. So devotees thought, well, how's it possible? Of course, Prabhupada had his heart attacks and he got sick a couple times, and devotees didn't know, but Krishna always kind of gave him more time. And he really wanted, there's a very famous little story with Giriraj Maharaj, maybe you've heard, when Prabhupada was very near the end of his earthly Leela, and he was like on his bed and could barely move and all those things, and he one night called in Giriraj Swami to come see him late at night, and Giriraj Maharaj came and he offered his obeisances, and Prabhupada was lying there quietly. And then Prabhupada asked him this one question: do you think it will go on? Or how will it go on? Maybe it's one of those two. Do you think it will, or how will it go on? I think it was, do you think? And Maharaj thought for a few minutes, and he said something to the effect, and I'll have to go back and check it, but it was similar to, if we're sincere, and if we chant Hare Krishna, it'll go on. And Prabhupada, listened quietly, and the moment or two went by. And then he said intelligence and organization. And that was all. And Maharaj was there for a few more minutes. Then he realized, okay, Prabhupada's delivered the message, and and he paid his obeisances and left. So Krishna consciousness is this wonderful mixture of, yes, sincerity in chanting Hare Krishna and practical application. So in this context, it's very important that we have the philosophical understanding of keeping Prabhupada in the center, but also the practical understanding of how we do that. And definitely it's going to be a challenge. I remember I was in India the year after Prabhupada passed away, and I can remember Satsrup Maharaj. I don't know why I remember this one lecture, but you hear what he said, and maybe that you'll also see is a little profound. This was like 1978. Prabhupada left the world November 1977, so probably March or April 78. I think it was in Vrindavan. And I can remember Raj gave a class. I don't remember anything about the class or any other class or anything else. But I remember him saying that no one should think that Prabhupada's left so someone can take his place, like that. It's not that Prabhupada's left and we can take his place, but now we have to continue to keep him in the center. So that was very true for my generation. Certainly there's been a lot of challenges doing that. But it's going to be true, I think, even more so and more equally as important in all of your generation. And how old are you? Are you 12 or so? Yeah. Okay, 12. Pretty good guess with your mask on, huh? What do you think of that, huh? Yeah. Probably because you got a T-shirt that says, I'm 12 years old this month or something. No, he looked down. I got him on that one, didn't I, huh? So, we don't know. We know that time is very precious, and we know that just like, Srila Prabhupada, we had a certain period of time, and now it won't be that much longer. Some of these great souls may live to be 100. Who knows? Maybe we have 30 more years for some people, but I think the majority of Prabhupada disciples will be gone pretty quick. I was sitting with two godbrothers today, talking about, remember so-and-so and so-and-so? Oh, yeah, he passed away. Oh, I didn't know that. Have you seen so-and-so? Oh, didn't you hear she died 2-3 years ago? What about so-and-so? Oh, I haven't, she might have, it was like reality check. These are people I remember being like 20 or 25 and so much strength. The time is there. It's anyone who's got a body, right? Death is certain. So we know that the time is there, time factor is there. So it's all that much more important for us, all of us, especially you that are younger than me, and especially those that are even younger, to really understand this principle of how we can build community by keeping Prabhupada in the center. And if we don't do that, community means, so many beautiful words that come from that. Communication comes from that, communal, commune, all these different things about coming together. It's almost like, I don't know, I'm not a scholar of language, but it's almost like it's a yoga word, right? To link, communal, maybe some roots that are some similar. So how do we keep that? How do we keep that community going? How do we keep that connection? And as we're describing, Prabhupada has such an essential role. So let's go to the practical one. What are some of the things we can individually do? And I know you're all busy, and sometimes you ask people, what can you do? Well, I can give 10 hours a week. And you're like, nah, I don't think so. Who's got 10 hours a week, right? It's like, come on, let's be serious here. No, Prabhu, I can do it. Okay. So what are some things we can do individually? Just think about it. And just, I'm not going to ask anybody to, raise your hand on the Bible and swear, or anything like that. But what are some of the practical things, simple practical things we can do to help us individually make sure that Prabhupada stays in the center? What are some ideas that any of you might have? Yes, Mataji.
Prabhu, what I am thinking is we can start first from our family. My spiritual master always says when we ask such questions like what to do like this Maharaj, then he will say about someone, my parents or my relatives, my friends, he will say more than prachar, achar is so important. So let us start with ourselves and particularly from our family, between husband and wife or between parents and children. So keeping Prabhupada in the center, reading together or chanting together, emphasize even one single point. If someone says, we can meditate on that point the whole day. That's how as practically we do as a family. Even my younger one, he reads Srimad Bhagavatam, he will share something. We all try to hear, not thinking like, why he's a smaller one, why should I listen to him? Not like that. So keeping away all of
He can give you many reasons why you should listen to him. You want a list? I can talk with him. We can come up with a long list for you.
So
yeah, that's very good. So it begins with the family.
Our own family.
It begins,
first.
yeah. It's not so much what they should do, but what can I do?
We can all start from within our
Very
family.
good. Very
slowly.
good.
Because when my son goes out for college, whatever he practices here, slowly he will start to give it to others.
Very good.
So
very good.
Yeah, that's my.
Yeah, good.
Just one
Please.
I came a little bit late, so I don't know if this was discussed. I mean, having Srila Prabhupada's Kirtan going on in our Naperville Center all the time.
Nice.
It feels his personal presence there.
Very good.
And then as for me personally, when I'm in the kitchen cooking, I have Srila Prabhupada's chanting going on, and those videos are so beautiful. I have seen so much, and still I'm like, and there is more I need to see those videos
Wonderful.
playing in the background. And so that makes, and then in between watching Srila Prabhupada's movie makes us feel so excited about his, whole
Very good.
thing. Yeah.
So hearing his kirtan and seeing the videos and the movies about him, and good.
That
Very
is
good.
very inspiring. Thank you
Very
very
good.
much.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hari Bol.
Thank you for the wonderful interactive session. For me, I was thinking one main thing is unity. What we need practically that we need to take from learn. We have individual opinions, individual differences, which you covered already, but practically putting that in place and putting away all our individual egos and everything. And when the situation comes, are you doing it for Krishna, or that personally in my life that happened when you take shelter, and yes, I'm doing for Srila Prabhupada, not for someone, that helped me. And the third point I was thinking was preaching. We need to get out of our comfort zone. We think we have our luxury life, but every minute that you have, you wanted to preach, like, how we received it, we received through somebody, and it is our responsibility to give it to someone else. And practically when we do that, the results that they come, it's like amazing. And how Prabhupada, practically like sleeping 2 hours, like, I'm not trying imitation, but the urgency that he had, okay, I have to write this, like, take at least some inspiration from that and take every single minute and extend.
So one thing you mentioned, a few things, of we keep him in the center by understanding the urgency that he felt, and by trying to whatever we can to take that mood on ourselves. Okay, good. For you keep giving the microphone to others. I've noticed that. It's very tricky. Every time I ask a question, you grab the mic and you give it to someone else. You haven't spoken yet. I've been around a long time, Prabhu. I know some of these tricks myself, So you go next, okay? We'll give you a little lead time so you know it's coming. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Good to see you again.
I was gonna say like Sadhu Sangha, especially like I've heard in like the past couple classes of Prabhupada Maharaj that he's really brought in point of Sadhu Sangha being like a central point for all like community and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, especially for Prabhupada being in the center, it's important for us to keep Sadhu Sangha in the center as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Very good. So one way we keep, a very important way of keeping Prabhupada in the center is to make sure we're associating with the Prabhupada Nugas. You know, we may think, okay, I'm keeping Prabhupada in the center, but if I'm not associating with others who had Prabhupada in the center, then my center is going to get pulled somewhere else. Very, very good. Good, thank you.
For me, reading Prabhupada books carefully is one thing I'm trying to connect.
Very good.
Initially, actually, I thought I know Prabhupada so much, but after carefully reading, I'm having like a second thought, but it's because there are so many instructions, variety of instructions. Whatever said here is different from somewhere else. So bringing them all together, so that needs a lot of careful attention in the attention and what Prabhupada was meaning at this point of context, why he's trying to make this particular point here, which is apparently contradiction somewhere else, right? So that needs a very real, good, careful reading of Prabhupada books. That way, I will have better appreciation for Prabhupada and connect him well.
Very good. So carefully reading and being sure to try to understand the context. Very good point. Mataji, please.
I have a similar point, Prabhu, for reading Srila Prabhupada book. Sorry. We just had this celebration at the temple on Sunday.
Okay.
Vamshidhari Prabhu and Shatrupa Mataji, they had started this reading groups just at the beginning of COVID lockdown. So some of these members, they haven't even been to the temple. Forget about regular Sundays, but not
because of COVID, yeah.
No, like they didn't have exposure before. This is the first time they came in contact and started reading Srila Prabhupada books, mainly Srimad Bhagavatam, every day, all the weekdays, and completed 2 cantos. So it was a little awards and certification ceremony.
Very good.
So as part of the celebration, Vamshidhari Prabhu requested each of them to share some appreciation of book Bhagavata and person Bhagavata. Just hearing their appreciations of how Srila Prabhupada is touching their lives, connecting to him every day, reading in the association, it just boosted so much of my own faith and connection to Srila Prabhupada. So I was thinking reading Prabhupada books every day in the association.
Wonderful. Very good. A few more. There were some other hands.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So I was thinking two points, Prabhu. One is meditating on the things that Srila Prabhupada has done for us, and expressing that in a gratitude way. So that is one thing. So the other thing I was thinking, reading and distributing the books that Prabhupada has written to the out world there. So that will help.
Yeah, sometimes someone says, well, why should I read these books? Right, and then you go, oh, I really have to tell them what's in there, don't I? Yeah, good. Yes, Prabhu.
Before starting any challenging task, you can just take a moment to think about Prabhupada, because just thinking of him gets people lots of confidence in whatever they have to do, regardless of how challenging the task is, because he faced so many challenges along his entire life, not just during the establishment of ISKCON, just throughout his 80-something years of his life, he faced many challenges. So when we take a look at his life, or when we just take a moment to think about the challenges he went through, whatever task we are about to do just seems to be much easier, and we have it'll help us to accomplish the task. There won't be a lot of anxiety from our end.
Great. That's beautiful. That's really nice. So remembering him, especially when we are faced with some challenging task, and keeping in perspective, how challenging is this compared to what he did? So you can ask yourself, so is this kind of like going to Moscow by yourself at 75 years of age and trying to spread God consciousness, and they could throw you in jail and you never be heard of again? Like, yeah, I think I can handle this test. You know, I think I can handle this math task or whatever, right? Yeah, the boss is a little tough on me, but it's a little easier than Mr. Nair was in Juhu. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just my perception has been that Sanatana Dharma is not like a religion that was meant to be spread, like some of the other religions, right? At least last few decades, I didn't have any strong leader that believed in spreading religion. And Prabhupada, I call this, it's a revolutionary what has been accomplished in such a short period as Kali Yuga is progressing. Just commendable work.
Yeah, very good. Sometimes he would use this expression as spiritual revolution, right? Or sometimes a cultural revolution meant to bring about, what was the exact term? Correct the misguided lives of an impious civilization. Yeah, the misguided lives. And people's lives are so misguided, it's really bad. One or two more? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Just expanding on what most of the others have said, reading Prabhupada books is like a commandment. I think we should all read. I enjoyed books like, Life Comes from Life. That was probably the first book which swayed me away from science.
You're a scientist?
I used to think so.
Oh, wow, what a wonderful answer. What kind of scientist did you used to be?
I thought everything is physics and math and,
Okay.
Then nowadays when I see the reports, like scientists, particularly astrophysicists or even microbiologists, they don't know what they're thinking. Every day they give a new speculation with no basis onto it. Whereas when you read Prabhupada books, it becomes very clear. And like you said, he's a revolutionary. His language is revolutionary. Initially when I read, with the help of Shatrupa Mataji and others, like a nectar of instructions, there are so many passages where, it almost looks like, oh, he's a revolutionary, but he's speaking like a spiritualist. So, but then after careful consideration, like
he's a revolutionary, but he's not an anarchist.
Yes, you're right.
He's talking about the supreme authority, so he's not an anarchist, yes. But a revolutionary, yes.
But sure enough, he catches the minds and knows how to turn them around. Like Vrindavan Prabhu was stating earlier, reading his books carefully is very important.
Very good.
And that was one thing I wanted to say. The other thing is a more practical one. While chanting Prabhupada's japa is going on the side. And
good.
All of a sudden, you hear him saying, sit straight, sit properly, and you're like, oh.
And he does it every half an hour, too.
and he goes back.
All around the world, he's telling people, sit properly.
So
that's another way we're brought together, because he's telling each and every one of us to sit properly.
Yeah, and it feels personal.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
Finally, one of the best books that I love from him is the Lilamrut, where when you read the Lilamrut, you'll see every chapter, every page, there are episodes and incidents where how much how much difficulty he went through in propagating but never wavered. Wavering is perhaps my, constitutional position, but his is exactly opposite to that. Yeah. And, probably that is the biggest thing that somebody like me and I can take from Prabhupada.
I'd like to comment on that a little bit. I think important to underscore that, that in addition to reading Prabhupada's books, I think it's essential to read books about Prabhupada. Because then it puts it in context, Like let's say, Bhagavad Gita, principles of knowledge, humility, and Prabhupada analyzes those very carefully. But then it's like, well, what does that mean to be humble? How do you apply that So, we use these terms. There's jnana, which is theoretical knowledge, vijnana. How do you apply that? And when we read about Prabhupada, we think about the challenges that Prabhupada faced. Then we get an understanding, what does that mean? So, tam statiksha shabardata, tolerate all of them. And then we read how Prabhupada was out, I think it was Delhi, where wasn't it? And he was gored by a cow. And, you think, okay, you're out trying to, you go in some parking lot, right? You're distributing some Bhakti-Gata magazines, a cow walks up between two cars and gores you and leaves you on the sidewalk. You might think, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. This is a little too difficult. And, so many challenges that were there, so many. And like you say, every page of those books, these different biographies of Prabhupada, and they give us an insight on how to apply that. And one thing I came across in my recent reading, this last year I spent a lot of time rereading Lilamrita, and then now I'm reading Giriraj Maharaj's book, and before that I was reading Shamasundar's books kind of back to back. And there's one, just exactly what you said. I'm flipping through this, and there's like a little paragraph that I probably read it at least 5-6 times, but there's so much there, I didn't remember this. And some of you may have heard me mention this before, but it's worth noting again. Prabhupada was 26 2nd Avenue, and they had the first temple, and the landlord's name, I don't know if I pronounced it right, but I think it's Mr. Chuti. I think it's Chutey, like that. So he himself was an immigrant, and he had Prabhupada sometimes would criticize him and mentions in class, not probably often, but how people work so hard because he invested all this money in this old rundown building, and now he's got to work hard day and night maintaining this building. But then Srila Maharaj mentions in the Lilamrita that Prabhupada would sometimes, if you can imagine, just put it in context, he just came from India just less than a year before, from Vrindavan, not just India, from Vrindavan, very aware of principles of cleanliness, very well of the association of benefit associated with pure-minded people and avoiding the association of materialistic people, what to speak of sinful behaviors, this and that. But it describes her that Prabhupada told his disciples, you should be, and his followers, be very respectful to Mr. Chuti, because he didn't like these young people, they would sleep in the temple at night, and Prabhupada was just like open door policy, trying to find anybody interested, serious in Krishna consciousness. And it's described that sometimes Prabhupada would help Mr. Chuti take out the neighbor's trash. So you think about that. He just came from India, right? And we all know something. I mean, we've seen it. Sometimes you go someplace like, even like here, like say you go to the Mumbai restaurant in the temple. If you knock some food on the floor, sometimes it'll sit there for 10 minutes because they're waiting to see, which class of person is supposed to pick that up. I mean, not so much in our temples, but definitely, Prabhupada's like, topmost. He's helping to take the trash out. And in those days, I mean, we may think, okay, trash, big deal. You tie up the plastic bag, you carry it. That's not what trash was like in the 1960s. There were no plastic bags. People had metal cans, and you threw all your terrible things in. So there's no details given there, but just I read that. I thought, this is amazing. And he didn't have to do it, right? Did he have to do that? Was Mr. Chuti going to cancel his lease if he didn't expect this elderly man to help you take the? Why did Prabhupada have to? Why did he do that? Such humility. Of course, we can't enter his mind, but just so much humility that he's in his, relationship. Perhaps, this Mr. Chuti is the landlord. He can tell you to move out in any time, and got to deal with all these crazy young people and drums in the middle of the morning, and taking the trash, the neighbor's trash. Not that he helped take his own trash out. I'm sorry we didn't take our trash out. The boys forgot. Let me do it. That would be one thing. That in itself would be miraculous. But the neighbor's trash. And there's so many examples of that. Other examples we have, that early period is so phenomenal. Prabhupada was living with the Agarwals, and he was actually staying at the YMCA for those first 30 days or so, and he came back to their home and was doing programs at night. The Agarwals were not vegetarian. One night Prabhupada came a little early. Sally Agarwal was a little late in cleaning up, and she said, "Oh, Swamiji, you're early. I haven't had a chance to clean everything up. The smells, it must be very disturbing to you." You remember what Prabhupada said? Anybody know? Short, sweet answer. He said, think nothing of it. Think nothing of it. So you think nothing of it. I mean, we think about it. We see people doing, think nothing of it. And again, he just came from Vrindavan. And he's, his four principles are there. He didn't change them, and he's going to start right in the beginning, no meat, fish, or eggs. And here's this person, and she married an Indian man. He ought to know. And his father, he had some kind of connection with his father, so his father ought to be able to tell the son, to tell the wife, to look, this is a holy man. Don't you, there's so many reasons Prabhupada could have got upset, What kind of nonsense are you? Don't you know there's karma? Those are living entities. How much pain? Think nothing of it. Now, does that mean Prabhupada didn't think it was important? Of course it's important. He came to change that whole culture, the revolution you talked about. He came to change that. But in that time and place, he was a guest in their home. They had arranged for him to come to the country. They weren't his disciples, and they were offering his home as a place to preach and teach, and they were being very gracious to them. Prabhupada's a sannyasi. Everybody's seen that picture. Prabhupada with that little boy, Bridge, I think was his name, right? Sannyasis generally don't play with little 1-year-old boys, do they? I mean, in India, historically, maybe today they do it a little more liberal, but, right? I mean, maybe there's pictures of Shankaracharya playing with little, I've never seen a picture of that, It's not, and Prabhupada married people, and he even writes in the Gita. He thought it was, that important. He put it right in the Gita eternally. It's there, as long as the movement's there, that, what is the sannyasi doing marrying people? It's necessary. Why is it necessary? Because he describes it, he uses sense expression. He says a young man at a lower stage of life, I think he says stage, emphasis lower, marriage is important, as opposed to him, the elderly person, sannyasi. And therefore, there's nobody else to do this, it's my duty. It's not sannyasi's duty. Is it sannyasi's duty to marry people? Is it sannyasi's duty to play with little children? Is it sannyasi's duty to take out the trash? No. So what is that teaching? It's teaching what Lord Chaitanya said. I'm not a Sudra, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Brahmin. Right? I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not a Grahasta, I'm not a brahmachari, I'm not a Vanaprastha. What am I? Servant to the servant to the servant to the gopis, which means I'm a Vaishnava. And I think that those are the kind of things when we read, about, and when we hear or see sometimes movies, things like that, when we hear about how did Prabhupada apply it, it gets back to that example that many of you talked about. What's the example? So we have to simultaneously understand, in a sense, the books in one sense. Of course, they also are filled with Leela in pastimes and how different great acharyas and saints and sometimes not so saintly people, how they acted and what the results. And in addition to that, when we look at our founder Acharya, who is so essential for us, who Krishna particularly empowered to take the purest tradition and apply it in the most corrupt communities around the world. I mean, Prabhupada went to the center of atheism and still started Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada went to, the West, which was, New York it's still a crazy city, still. And back then it was a crazy city. But still he instilled Krishna consciousness in that environment. And he knew how to say things like, think nothing of it to Sally Agarwal. And then, of course, and I'll finish just a minute, there's other funny stories, kind of like the other side of the coin. Srila Maharaj tells a story, and I won't get it exactly right, but kind of close. He was with Prabhupada once, and they were passing out some prasadam or something, and Srila Maharaj was there, and I guess he ate something or he drank some water, and Prabhupada chastised him, you go wash your hands, go wash your mouth. And maybe it happened twice. Someone made it was like a big thing. Prabhupada directly told him that. And Maharaj tells the story. So a little while later, there's a little darshan. So many people there with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada handed out prasadam to everybody. So Srila Maharaj said, okay, Prabhupada, you got to wash your hands. I heard that message. So he went out, got a glass of water or a bottle of water, and he's walking around to all the people. Probably, what are you doing? Nonsense? I don't know what he said, but that was the mood. He chastised him. Srila Maharaj was like, wait for Prabhupada, you just told me, So again, example is there. So when Prabhupada's with his disciple and no one else is there, Paka, high standards, cleanliness, you should know better. But when there's other people who are just being introduced to Krishna consciousness and may not be so careful with their culture in this sense, is the essential thing that they wash their hands? Or is the essential thing that they feel welcome and they hear the philosophy and they feel some affection and they want to come back? what's the most important thing? And some of you may be seeing, you mentioned earlier, somebody mentioned about movies of Prabhupada. If you look at Your Ever Well-Wisher, was such a beautiful movie. I think that's when there's an interview with Sally Agarwal, right? And she starts talking about Prabhupada. And she says, the time he spent with us, he was such a wonderful man. And she begins to cry. And she says, actually, those were, thinking back, those were the most wonderful days of my life. So what effect and he didn't tell her, stop this, stop this, stop this. And I think she's still alive. Her husband passed away a few years ago. But I've seen her at New Vrindavan. She visits there once in a while. Devotees love her. Butler is kind of close. Butler, Pennsylvania is kind of close. She loves the devotees, and she's not a card-carrying Hare Krishna 16 rounds a day. But she's definitely a special soul that's got a lot of mercy from Krishna and probably going to go back to God before me, because, who was she to be picked to do this wonderful service for Srila Prabhupada? But that's the kind of effect it had upon her. So again, getting back to community, just to wrap it up, I think, Prabhupada's taught us that a community, well, we've taught ourselves tonight, community needs to be centered around Prabhupada. And there's so many different there's so many benefits of doing that, as you all discussed, and there's so many ways of doing that, as we discussed. And conversely, we talk about what happens if we don't do that. That's a whole nother question. But by keeping Prabhupada in the center, it unites us. And also by keeping him in the center, it reminds us what our community is really centered on, which is him as a person. But you could say almost more important. If he was here, he would say more important. And back to where's the original point? Vapu and Vani, right? You taught us a few minutes ago about Vapu and Vani. Yes, I heard you teach us. So, Prabhupada would say, okay, you're remembering me, you've got my murti, you're chanting my pranam prayers, you're following, you're studying my books. Have you understood my mission? Have you understood my mission? And according to our individual capacity, none of us are, nobody in this room is going to ever sell as many books or inspire people the way Vaisheshika Prabhu does. Maybe he will. He's got a few years ahead of him. I don't know. He's only 12. We'll see. When you're about 25, we'll see how you're doing. But unlikely. But we all have our own individual capacity, And you mentioned, Machaji, like we get in our comfort zone. So the other question is we should try to be a little bit in our stretch zone. Not the panic, the three: comfort, stretch, panic. We should be in that stretch zone. And always remember that, okay, we want to put Prabhupada in the center. We have to put Prabhupada in the center. And that it means reading his books and reading the books about him so we understand his mood and his mission, and so that we can create that environment as well. So the environment is not just, crack the whip, read the books, sit up straight, don't point your feet at the deities, and there's a lot of rules that help us in our Krishna consciousness. But really the most important rule is to help people somehow or other become attracted to Krishna. And that was Prabhupada's mood. You look like all the things he tolerated. You have to ask, well, why did he tolerate those things? Was it just because he's a great, yogi who performs penance? Well, he is, but a lot more meaning for that. He tolerated all those things because he knew an important mission. Again, you read Lilamrita, when he was on the Bowery, he describes, sometimes it was such horrible there. Skid Row. He would literally have to step around dead bodies to get into his place. We're in Bolingbrook and Naperville, and you don't see that kind of stuff here. Probably tolerated. Other people would have said, after everything else that he should have gone back to India for, that would be like the last straw. Okay, a dead body, I'm nice American phrase, I'm out of here. Enough is enough. But for Prabhupada, it's just, one other little disturbance among a series of disturbances that could not disturb him. That's one last thing I'll say. That sometimes there's a thought, well, Prabhupada, somehow he wasn't disturbed. Okay? Not being disturbed does not mean not aware or experiencing the disturbance. You can experience the disturbance and be disturbed, and you can experience the disturbance and not be disturbed. You can kick your toe and Krishna, 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 or you can kick your toe and, say other things from a different mode of nature. What comes, but either way. So the disturbance is there. So we shouldn't think like Prabhupada didn't feel anything when he got gored by the cow. I was, again, in these readings, Prabhupada talks several times, Prabhupada's explaining the anxieties of a particular problem. He would tell his disciples, they're so great, I could not translate my books last night. I was thinking about this problem. So it's not like Prabhupada's just floating over like a cloud. Because sometimes we may think, oh, these problems I face are so great. Yeah, Prabhupada, but, for him it wasn't a problem. No, Prabhupada he experienced all the pain and the challenges and the disappointments and the disciples who fell down, and some of them even took money and took properties and, made stupid mistakes. In the Juhu story, Prabhupada was so intent on buying that building. At one point, a few disciples got together. They canceled the purchase order. And then somehow they called Prabhupada. They told him or something. And he'd been working for like months, maybe years. And they just said, well, it's better we just cancel this thing. So now Prabhupada not only has to overcome the problems with the cheating salesperson, his own disciples, who he told them, whatever you do, we got to get this property. And they've been fighting. They'd say, well, maybe Prabhupada, it's better if we don't. Cancel the purchase agreement. Which just made it 100 times more difficult. And there was a disturbance for him, but he wasn't disturbed, which means he didn't stop his mission. He didn't stop his faith in Krishna. He didn't stop his intense desire to give, to create this project and every other project to help people. So that's something that takes practice for us. And that's another reason we need community. Because when we're with community, because partly community means rah, singing and dancing, we're happy together. That's beautiful. Community also means, Prabhu, I'm having a really tough time. My mind is giving me a problem. My body's giving me a problem. My boss is giving me a problem. My finances are giving me a problem. My teachers are giving me a problem, whatever it is. And I need to talk with somebody. And how are you doing? And we should know that as devotees, we shouldn't think that listening to inspire people and also being human enough to share with them. Boy, I really want to hear your thing, but also understand I've also experienced difficulties. You may think, whatever, I came 2 days before you did, I'm senior devotee, or whatever it is. I also, face challenges and hardships. And you know what I just read about Prabhupada and what happened in Juhur? You know what I just read about Prabhupada when he was trying to, sell his books and magazines in Calcutta and in Delhi? And you know what I just read about Prabhupada with this and this and this and this and this? And as I think you said earlier, then it puts everything in context for us. So that's a big part of community. We should never think you become a Hare Krishna and all the problems go away. No. Become a Hare Krishna and we have a means to overcome the problems. As Prabhupada did. He's the example of overcoming problems par excellence. And none of us will ever face that kind of problem. And look at our book. Problems, my goodness. That's my grandfather over there, Krishna. That's my Acharya over there, Krishna. Those are my cousins over there, Krishna. So then our problems are like, what's the problem? Not a problem. Okay. So we have time for question or two. I know it's a working night and all that. I don't want to go too late. If you need to go, I can see the looks on some of your face like, yes. So should we just stop? Is it best? Or maybe a couple quick questions? What should we do? And I know, again, you've had lots of wonderful Sangha with Maharaj the last week or so.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful class.
Now, you're the one that shook your head when I said, should we quit now? You said yes. Oh, no. So now you can't ask a difficult, complicated question, okay?
So, ISKCON is very famous for many of the things, and one thing one of my friend and I was talking about, he said the number of divorces in ISKCON is pretty high.
The number of? Divorces, yeah.
So as a community, I don't see reading any chapters about an ISKCON disciple course like something talking about that or setting some sort of things. So what are the possibilities, or how are we handling that as part of community development?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll say in general, ISKCON is new, and even though 50 years in one sense or 55, it's pretty long. When we're building a community and trying to transplant a tradition into a variety of different cultural situations, it's complicated. And oftentimes, just like if there's something wrong with your house, there may be many things wrong. You kind of focus your energy on this and this and this. And as time goes by, you realize there's other things we really need to spend attention on. So you specifically mentioned divorce. Really, Prabhupada didn't like divorce. Prabhupada didn't want divorce. Many times Prabhupada said there's no such thing as divorce. But at the same time, devotees got divorced even when Prabhupada was there. It happened. It's Prabhupada, some people got remarried when Prabhupada was there. Some sannyasis even got remarried. So Prabhupada's like, absolutely not acceptable, except when you have to. It's kind of like that. So that's kind of the bigger picture. And I think that it's one of those things that, just like there's a nice devotee, some of you may be taking some classes from her, named Rambaru. Any of you know Rambaru? So she has like the equivalent of a PhD in pastoral counseling. They don't use that term PhD, but she's like a professor in that. So she's teaching devotees in many places, mostly in the Western world, but probably in India, some people from there too, about grief counseling and understanding your own emotions better, and a lot of things that we didn't really put a lot of emphasis on in the past. So as the society grows more and more, we need to do these things. Like when I first became a devotee, I remember there was one man that wanted to, he became involved in the temple. I don't know if he ever wanted to move in, but he wanted to become a devotee, and he was a concert pianist. Okay? Now, if you're a concert pianist, what's your most valuable and sensitive thing that you have besides maybe your piano? What is it? He got it, yeah. You're only 12? He's a violinist. Okay, great. So similar. With the violinist, it's similar. A little different piano. Your hands, okay? And I remember it's like a new bhakta, right? So what do new bhaktas do in Hare Krishna temples? You wash pots. You wash pots. And washing pots means there's like a big thing of water, and there's like, and you don't know what's down there. Could be pots, could be knives, could be crocodiles. Who knows, right? And you're just supposed to stick your hands down in there and wash pots until the skin gets all flaky. And for most of it, it's just like really wonderful service, great purification. For a concert pianist, it's not, it doesn't work. But we're like pianists, pot washer. Doesn't matter. So I give that example. It's a true story. But just in the sense that as we grow bigger and mature more, we start seeing there's more and more things that are essential parts of Krishna consciousness. Like we should have been able to figure out how to engage him in Krishna consciousness. So in the same way, as we mature, we start seeing more and more the need to ensure we have very strong families. And that requires a whole lot of stuff. Requires a spiritual foundation. It requires teaching devotees and our children at a very early age about respecting other people. Particularly in this culture, they need to respect women. Women, it's a big struggle we know in the world out there about, respecting women, and also about the need for, and I think, generally people, many of you coming from Indian culture, is much more sense of sacrificing for the whole, right? The children sacrifice for the parents, everybody, and even like the whole concept of extended families is much stronger in India. Now it's changing. I don't know what the divorce rate in India is these days, but it's not good. It's probably close to what it is here. And in one sense, you think, well, how is it possible? Because we have a spiritual culture, but, we're still people. And we have emotions and feelings and all that. So I can't give any specific answers other than we need to, there's a Grahasta Vision course, there's a something in Canada now, I don't know if they're still enforcing them, but for years, you couldn't get married in an ISKCON temple if you didn't take the premarital counseling course. And as an example, one of the things they say is, you see this out there, I don't know how much it affects our culture. A lot of times people, they prepare for months for the wedding. no preparation for the marriage, isn't it? It's all about what dress you're going to wear, what kind of flowers, and who's the bridesmaids, and, this and that, and you got to get the best sari from New York, and, your mother's jewelry, and, everything else. And he's like, I don't really want to ride a horse. Do I have to ride a horse? Like for debating for weeks, right? But then, like, okay, you're married. Now what do we do? Well, good luck. You can, here's the remnants from the cake, and that'll last you for a couple hours, and who washes the dishes, you figure it out, right? And I'll give an example of a little joke that's kind of a problem, a story. Like, as the story goes, like a man from northern, it's probably you could figure out some Indian version of it, tell it again. But so a man from Northern Europe, like a Swedish guy, and he marries an Italian lady, and, and the relationship is strained, and they finally decide they're going to get a divorce. They just, incompatible differences, right? So they go to court, and then they say, we're incompatibly, we just can't stay together anymore. The judge says, well, what do you mean? What does it mean you're incompatible? And the man says, she doesn't respect me. How can I live with a woman who doesn't respect me? And she says, I respect you so much. And the judge, well, what do you mean she doesn't respect you? He says, well, like Your Honor, simple example. We've been married for 5 years. Every single day, she cuts off the crust of the bread, and that's what she gives me, the hard end of the bread. And everybody knows that the inside soft part of the bread is the best. And she's like shocked. And she says, I'm from Italy. In my family, every time you cut the bread, you cut the hard crust that everyone treasures the most, and you give it to the father. The most respected person in the family always gets the crust. And he's like, no, I'm from Sweden. You take the soft part from the center. And then I don't know the rest of the story, but the judge probably said, go home and work it out a little bit, There's some communication. So I don't know if it's like, one side of the tripodi or the other side, or, I don't know how it works. But communication is essential. And I think our tradition ideally should really help create strong marriages. One is, if we really understand I'm the servant, I'm the servant. It's not like, okay, I'm the man and now I have a servant. It's like I'm the husband and I have a wife to serve, and I have children. I may in the future have children to serve, and the wife now has a husband to serve. And together we have a mission to serve. We have gurus to serve. We have the parampara to serve. So that's one thing that should help us get out of kind of the self-centeredness that leads to a lot of the problems. And I think, that's the main thing. And I think a second thing is that we should have a really deep philosophical understanding that, there is no perfect person for me in this world. The culture today is, hey, you marry a beautiful lady, and a couple years later she gains a few pounds, or he doesn't make as much money as you thought he was going to, and, next. There's got to be somebody better. But a Krishna conscious perspective is we're looking for Krishna. That's that loving relationship that's going to satisfy me. And people in my life are important, and I love my wife, or I love my husband, I love my family members. And that love is centered, understanding that ultimately only Krishna can satisfy me, and only Krishna can satisfy you. As opposed to she's the most beautiful woman, was at the Chicago temple, we walked down the beach the other day with Jai Krishna, and some guy was there with the speakers and singing some song. I don't know if it was his own song or what, I don't know any popular music these days. But it was something like, baby, when I look in your eyes, you're everything for me. And then it's like, please come back. So like, that's what it's all about. You're everything, but then I lost you, or you're everything, but get out of my life, because I thought you were everything, but it's terrible. But if Krishna's in the sense of, okay, we're going to form a partnership. You're not the supreme anything, and I'm not the supreme anything, and don't think of me that way, because I will let you down. But if you can help me make spiritual life, you're my best friend. And sometimes you're going to help me in really friendly ways, and sometimes you're going to help me by challenging me. I'm going to have to learn to do things I don't like. I'm going to have to learn to compromise. I'm going to have to learn to, give up a lot of conceptions about being in the center and being in control. I was with 4 or 5 senior devotees yesterday, and they were all just kind of laughing about how I guess one of them said, some sannyasi said, yeah, the best way to get humble is don't take sannyas, you get married. You know? Because, it's just a bunch of men talking. They say, because your wife will bring you right down to the reality very quickly, So sannyasis, it's tougher. There's no woman in their life to tell them, where they're really at. Everybody's telling them they're special. But, you get married, it's like, you get a reality check right away, So, the marriage ashram is meant to help us in so many ways. But I think we have to get into it with the right perspective. But at the same time, we're conditioned souls, and we need systems beyond what I know, because I'm not trained in the social worker, counselor, and anything like that. So, but there are devotees developing those things. Simple things, how to help each other see things better. Understand there are differences in men's psychology and women's psychology. Men, we have this issue. We want to fix everything, right? Women, okay, fix it, but I just wanted to express my feelings. Guys are like this too, but sometimes women a little more like that. So the classic example, the woman comes home, maybe they say they're both working as an example. They come home for work and she says to the husband, I think I'm going to quit. I just can't deal with Mary. I've just had it up here with Mary. And being a good guy, he tries to fix the problem. He says, I just saw in the one ads today, there's a couple people, there's some positions with your requirements available, such and such company. And she says, well, why would I want to work for that company? And he says, well, but you just told me you're really fed up with Mary. I thought this would be like a good thing. Look, it's a good job. They get benefits, we can travel and and it goes from there, right? And he's completely confused because he's thinking that, well, I'm trying to fix your problem, and she's like, what are you trying to fix me for? And he's like, I'm trying to help you, and then he storms upstairs and she's, and he's eating cold chapatis downstairs and she's crying upstairs and nobody can figure out what's wrong, And what he should have said was, sounds like you had a really hard day today. She goes, you can't believe what a hard day I had today. Mary did this and this and this and this and this. And you say, wow, that's the third time this week Mary's done that. He hears it. He affirms her feelings. You've heard this before. And she feels, verified, validated in that, And then conversely, when something is wrong with the house, there's a nail popped out of the drywall or, one of these modern things we experience. And he gets out his little toolkit and says, I'm going to take care of it. And she says, don't take care of it. Call the fix-it man. And he's like, no, I can do it. No, you can't. Oh, now you went right to the core of that male ego. I can fix it. We're not free from these bodily conceptions. So that's a big part of it. Understanding the differences in psychology and honoring those. And it's not that I am a man. I'm a spirit soul. It's not that she's a woman. But we're in these bodies. We have these minds. We have these emotions. We're wired a little differently. So knowing those and respecting those. Because otherwise it's like, well, he just doesn't understand. Well, he's trying to understand, but he doesn't have the tools. He needs help understanding. And conversely, what she doesn't understand, Radha's husband knows how to fix those things. Ooh. Wow. For the male, you're like a balloon, right? All the air just went out of the balloon, where it's just like, I know you can fix that, it'll probably take you 2 months, but I know you can fix it, something like that. Then that's it's a very simple example, but there's different mentalities, so that's part of it. Certainly keeping Krishna in the center, knowing that we're servants, understanding that this person is not going to be perfection and satisfy all my desires. My desires can't be satisfied until I connect with Krishna. And understanding the psychology a little bit differently. Okay? Thank you. Maybe we should stop. Should we stop there? One more? Maybe it's other than Mary's life? We're going to quit at 8:30 Paka. If there's anything else. Anything else? I'd just like to comment to our scientists. We'll go to you, please. That fact that you're a scientist and you speak about Krishna and preach about Krishna and why, that is a very important service. Because maybe there's a lot of scientists, when lay people, it's like science, there's no God or we've explained everything. We don't know how to express those things. We're just simple people with faith. But when you stand up and say science doesn't answer anything, and some of those amazing things you said before, people sit up and listen. So be emboldened to preach like that. Yes, Prabhu. What does your 12 years of wisdom inspire you to say to us?
So I have a question. So,
Okay.
next year, well, 7th grade, I'm going to be taking harder classes.
Okay.
So, and at the same time, I am taking a few like Bhagavatam classes in Sunday school.
Okay.
And if I like have some club that I want to join that will help me like in school, should I sacrifice like a class for my studies? And if I have homework or something.
Can you think of a verse where Krishna gives an answer to that question?
Not really.
I don't know the Sanskrit of this one, but Krishna says one who is moderate, or sometimes it's different translations. One is regulated. One who is moderate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all the pains of the material world by practice of yoga. So he says recreation there. So I can give an example from my life. When I first went to high school, and I had a school counselor, and I had all these classes, chemistry, biology, physics, English 2, algebra 3, whatever, And the counselor looked at me like, what you wanted to torture yourself for? She said, there's nothing fun here. Is there anything you like to do? You like to play tennis, you like to sing, you like to play an instrument? And it was like, well, I like to sing. She said, great. The teacher there's great. She teaches chorus. It's a great. And that became, actually, that experience, I forgot my chemistry teacher, all those people long ago. But the relationships I had with the kids in that class and that teacher and what she taught me still lasts to today. I still actually remember her sometimes singing in front of the deities, and I think about how to hit high notes, and I remember her. And I think, Krishna, is any benefit for this? Please give it to her. So balance is important. If you need a little space to grow as a person and not just technical stuff. So yeah, adjust a little bit. And it's like when you're running. If you're going to run a race, like a 2-mile race, do you go full speed? No, you got to pace yourself, right? Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Remember that verse, and she can teach you the Sanskrit later. It's a beautiful verse. 6:17. Great. Very important verse. Okay, so with those final words of wisdom, we'll call it a night. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki